Hi everyone, welcome back to another Android development stream. That intro music is more for me than it is for you guys. It always gets me so hyped up. Hi Brian, thank you for coming. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Speaking of that intro music, I did notice in playing back last week's video on Twitch that it sounds like if you play music that you don't own, Twitch is unlikely to yell at you, but what they will do is in the video recording they actually mute the audio anytime music is playing, and whatever sort of process they have for like muting that audio doesn't always know exactly where to stop. And so this like intro section where I was just talking last week is actually still completely muted, and unfortunately is like muted partway into like actually doing the coding and talking about some of that stuff. So if you were watching Saturday's recording, I'm sorry about that. Hopefully that's not a huge distraction. But I do also have a local copy of each of these streams because I had planned to someday throw them up on YouTube, and maybe I will have to go through sooner rather than later and do that so you can all have the full unedited versions without worrying about certain parts being muted. So welcome everyone. I think by now we probably have a handful of regulars, but if you're new to the stream, you have no idea what we're working on, just ask. But also check out the project here. The README and GitHub says everything. And if you need a link to the project, you can go ahead and do !GitHub in chat, and that link will drop. Nightbot should come in periodically and put it there as well. So you can find this, give it a star, follow along, see what we're working on. In the project page, you can see all of the links and resources from each of the past streams, all the way up into today's, where you can see the question link, and I'll go ahead and put that in chat for you now. That should get posted repeatedly as well. But if any of you have questions and you're not comfortable posting them into the Twitch chat, go ahead and go over there, ask your questions anonymously. When I'm waiting for Gradle to build or things like that, I'll go look at those questions and I'll be able to answer them for you. So we can dive in. This is our 5th stream. That's an exciting milestone, to do 5 of these now. I appreciate all of you who have come to hang out for 1 or more of these. But I've kind of hit this point. I mean, there's still so much left to do in this app. If you haven't seen it yet, all we have so far is this app that shows a recycled view of articles from my blog, and when you click on it, it will take you to the actual blog post. That's not very exciting. There's a lot more to do, but I've kind of reached a point where I don't really know what I wanted to focus on today. I have made some GitHub issues here. Bump these up so you can see these text a little more clear, of some ideas I had of things that I want to add. This is not an exhaustive list, so let me know if you think of anything different, but I'd actually thought I'd start today and just kind of open it up to chat and see if any of you were like really passionate about a specific issue here, or had some ideas for the app that you want us to explore today. So feel free to throw that out there. If you don't have one, I do have a favorite that I'm going to pick. The only thing on here before someone says it that I don't really want to do today is looking into dependency injection solutions. I think that's really important. I think I could even do that next week, but I feel like that's something I should mentally prepare for and actually look at some of them ahead of time so I know what I'm talking about, or I'm just going to be tripping over myself for the next hour, and I don't really want to do that. So I think any one of these would be interesting. I don't want to try to undersell talking about documentation. I think that it's an underrated skill that we don't talk about enough, or rather, we don't talk about how to write good comments. Like, we know what comments are. Some of us think comments are bad, we should never write them. I disagree. I think comments can be very helpful, and I think there are good ways of writing comments, and it would be fun to do that live and show some examples of that. But that's only if people are interested. I don't want to bore anyone either. No one has strong opinions. We don't have enough Android developers in here. We all have strong opinions. See, Prince gets it. But he comes from JavaScript land where there's no opinions. JavaScript lets you do whatever you want. There's no rules. You're telling me JavaScript does not let you do whatever you want? Oh, yeah. Alright, that's fine. That's fine. Error states. Yeah, so that was actually the either error or loading states were going to be where I started if no one said anything. I think the two are closely related because we'll have to change our networking layer to really like look at either one, so they're closely related. We could probably start with an error state. I actually kind of want to start with a loading state and then follow up with the error state, mainly because like what we have right now when we launch the app is we just get this blank screen and then all of a sudden some articles show up, and it would be nice to get something to fill that space. And I did comment on this loading animations ticket. Oh, now I might want to zoom out a little bit. We could consider using Lottie to show unique animation. If I'm going to do this, what I'm going to do is continue with the like iterative approach I've taken in most of these streams. Let's just show a standard Android progress bar, and then we can follow up and try to make a flashier animation. So I think since no one is really passionate about any others, I mean, and I'm down to do the error states, but me personally, I like having the loading one in first. So I'm going to start with that. And so we'll take this number 14, and we're going to go into Android Studio and we'll make a new branch. And we'll do loading state. Alright, so where do we want to start with the loading state? Well, the shortest piece of code to add is actually adding the UI here. So let's go into our fragment article list XML file, and inside here we just have a constraint layout. All that's inside is a recycler view. Let's add a progress bar as well, and we will set that to wrap content height and width. We'll give this progress bar an ID. We will just call it progress bar. I'm very original. Cool, the Nightbot's working. This will constrain to the start and top to top of and bottom. So this should center. I mean, if we look at the split, we can see this progress bar gets centered. And actually what we'll do, we'll change for both of these, but actually let's put both of these to gone. And then we'll, in the code, we will visibility gone. We will set the visibility as we need to. So where do we want to go to next? The next place we would want to go to get this loading state working is probably inside of our article list view model. So what this does right now is we have this live data we've exposed for a list of articles. We are going to want to change this to actually just expose like the view state, because that's what the view model is supposed to do. It's supposed to like interact with your data layer, do any work that needs to be done there, any data validation or things like that, and then it just exposes a view state, and then your view should be listening to that state and know how to update it. So let's make a new class for that first, to represent what that view state actually is, and let's call this article list view state. And what do we want here? Well, we want, we'll make it a data class. And inside of here, we want to know, should we show the loading? We could call this is loading or show loading. I think because it's a view state, I'm kind of leaning towards the naming of just calling it show loading, because we want to make this strictly about like the view state and not really like what does this actually mean. We just need the view to listen to this and know what to do with it. We can have another boolean for, show articles. We'll need to know eventually if we want to show an error. And then we might want additional information about those things. So like in this case, we will want to know what articles are tied to this view state, if any. And we could give this default parameters. Ideally, when we create this, we will specify everything as we should. But I'm going to make them defaults just because that can help later when I do testing to just create it and only specify the fields I care about. So yeah, we've got this view state. One thing I have seen people do to help clean up the code that's going to use this is to create some factory methods to create view states for us under like specific scenarios. So what I mean by that is like we could create a companion object here and we could create some static factory called loading and have this return an article list view state. And what this could do is this could just return the view state and we say show loading equals true. And so inside later on when I go to actually like create this loading state, I can just call this method instead of actually calling it to my constructor. That's nice, it helps with readability a little bit. It also abstracts away some of the details when I just want to say, hey, I need a loading state. This factory method is responsible for figuring out what a loading state means for this class. So we'll create another one called data, or let's call it success. And then that will take in the successful articles. List view state. And so in this one, we'll return article list view state. We'll say show articles equals true. And then articles equals articles. What I'm actually predicting this doesn't do great for us is like this isn't going to consider like an empty state scenario. So there's always a question on like when you show error states, what does it mean to error versus to have like a successful network request and there just be no data? Like what if I went through and I just deleted all of the blog posts on my website? Like maybe I should show an empty state. Something to think about, but I'm not actually going to do that here. And then this error state should probably take in like the error that happened, but for now, since we're going to build the error state later, I'm going to leave this out. And I'll just have this return one that shows the error state. Cool. So we've got these factory methods that will we'll set the view state to specific cases that I'm going to use. Like I said, we have above the defaults to everything are false, but maybe we could be more specific and we could say in success we show loading as false. That's probably like the safer question mark approach in case I change something about the default arguments and don't realize it. So let's go ahead and do that actually. I think I'd rather be explicit just for sake of understanding what's happening. And so I'm actually going to just remove the default arguments from here for now. I'll leave the articles one, so that's empty, but we'll make it specify all of these show states. Cool. So now we've got a view state, we've got factory methods to create them as necessary. So let's go over to our view model and use this. So we'll go into article list view model. We will follow this pattern that we used earlier on of we create a private live data which is mutable, so this class can manipulate its state, and we'll expose the live data that someone can observe to that is immutable, that no outside listeners should be able to change the state of this class. And we'll instead do this for a view state instead. So we'll create immutable live data of article list view state, and then keep a public state, live data, article list view state equals state. Alright, so we've got that. Let's, we could get rid of this articles. And now, inside of the init, or inside this coroutine for fetching the articles, this is where we can now use our new view state. So we'll start off by saying state.value equals article list view state dot loading. Hold on. Then we can do, where did I put, I don't have error handling anywhere yet. Interesting. So the way to do this right now, we'll actually move this code around, I think. Please hold. I want to remember what I did in Android Essence Article Service. Yeah, so right now I'm not properly handling like error cases. So that's something to keep in mind when it does come time to do the error state. So let's continue to assume for right now that this won't error. So we'll post the loading state. We'll say our articles equals article repository dot fetch articles, and then we can say state.value equals article list view state dot success, and then give it the articles that we requested. So now instead of like exposing the articles, what we're going to do is expose this as like a view state that our fragment will listen to, and it will know how to take that view state and configure the UI accordingly. So let's go over there. Article list fragment. And we'll delete this guy and create a new observer. So when we subscribe to the view model, we want to do viewModel.state.observe. We'll give it a view lifecycle owner and then an observer view state. And then let's, for readability's sake, let's create a private method called display view state. Article list view state. And then we'll put that in here. Oops. Okay. So let's talk about everything that needs to go in here. Well, what I would do is go through each of those booleans we set up and just conditionally show and hide a view. So we can do something like binding.progressbar.visibility equals, and then we can say if any reason to prefer data. That's a good question. Let me finish typing out this if statement. So we can do something like binding.progressbar.visibility, say if viewState.show loading, view.visible, else view.gone. And I actually think we should move that into an extension function. We'll do that in a second. So that was a good question. Any reason to prefer data classes here over sealed classes? I mean, I do like sealed classes, so it can be, because the risk of running data classes here is like, that we could end up in a state that doesn't make sense. We could end up in a state that says loading is true and show error is also true, and like that should never happen. That's one benefit to these like factory methods below. But if we have sealed classes and we have like one that specifies loading, one that specifies error, one that specifies success, we don't really have that problem. So I wonder if we should switch to sealed classes here. I think I'm gonna like keep this for now, but that's a good thought, and maybe we can we'll do this, we'll get a loading state working, and then we can actually revisit it and convert it to sealed class just for fun and see how it looks. I'm down to try that. let's finish this thought process. So when we're taking the view state and we're deciding whether or not to show a certain thing, this like if condition view.visible else view.gone, I'm going to have to repeat this like 3 times. And that's going to get really annoying. And so I like to write an extension function around view that will help eliminate that. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to go into our util path and what which is a boolean. And then here we can put that. We can say this dot visibility equals if condition view dot visible else view dot gone. And let's add brackets just for readability's sake here. So now in any view I can give it some condition whether or not to show, and it will do that for me. So then here I can go binding.progress bar, and then I can say visible if view state dot show loading. And I actually really love the way that this reads. And this is why I'm happy to circle back and do the sealed class version later, because it will be very quick to update this line to use like the sealed class approach instead of a data class approach. So we can do that after. We can say binding.article list.visible if view state.show articles, and then binding dot and then the other thing we need is the adapter.articles equals view state.articles. And now this is going to get called no matter what, which means like it will post like the empty articles when we're loading. We might want to only do this once we've loaded, but I think that's fine. I don't think that there's anything I need to be afraid of happening here. So let's run this and let's see how we did to start. One thing I might change now that I've said this in my head is my Fragment XML file. I defaulted everything to gone. I hid the recycler view, I hid the progress bar. I'm letting the view configure everything, which is going to work out fine, as we see right here. Progress bar shows up, and then we get the articles. If I, as the app developer, know that I'm most likely always going to start in a loading state, it might be fine to just say like the progress bar starts off as visible, because I want that to show up as soon as the view's inflated, and I know that the fragment will be responsible for hiding it when it's supposed to. So let's do that. Just make sure this works. Good. Nice. Alright, so I'm going to push that real quick. Loading state for number 14. Let's look at sealed classes, and just we can kind of look at them side by side and then talk about it and see which one we like more than the other. I like someone left a comment on using sealed classes. And also we want to write some unit tests. Let's do that. Let's write some unit tests. Do you want to look at sealed classes or unit tests first? Does anyone have a preference? If no one says unit tests, I'm going to go for unit tests. All right. Okay, so let's do that. And actually, if I show you one of my favorite things about writing unit tests, the robot pattern, it will be easy for us to update that to consider a sealed class approach as well. Okay, so I should actually make, moving forward, writing unit tests like a forefront of the app. We should do like test-driven development. So let's write some unit tests for the article list view model, and then we can use a TDD approach for the error state. I wonder if I should, cool. I wonder if I want to merge this code separately. Nah, it'll be fine. Okay, let's write some unit tests. So, one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts, if you have a class and you want to write unit tests for it, you can hit Command-Shift-T, and that will show you any classes, test classes for this already. If not, you can create a new one. And it already is going to take the class name and throw the word test after it. Oh, that's hard to see. This is article list view model test. So we hit OK. We want to put this in our regular test folder, not our Android test folder. And we will go ahead and add that to Git. Now the first thing I do before I write any test is I actually like to work with test robots. And what a test robot is basically like a layer of abstraction between the component under test and your actual test cases themselves. And the benefit of having that additional layer is that if I change something about the view model or the component under test, the only place I need to update is inside the test robot itself. And then all of my unit tests, when ideally I have dozens of them, none of them need to be updated, because just the robot needs to know the change, and then all of your tests will still work. This will give us an added benefit that we'll see in making tests really easy to read, really easy to compose. So that'll be fun. So let's create a new file in the same. So here we are in the test package. We're going to create a new file right next to the article list view model test, and we're going to call this one article list view model robot. And now I know that testing is unique, and in the way that, like, I might go faster than I should be here. So please do not be shy about like pausing me in chat. I'll keep my eye on it if I go really fast. So we'll create our article list view model robot. And what this will be responsible for is building the view model and then interacting with it. So we can do something like, well, let's start by saying this keeps track of a view model, an article list view model. And then we'll create a function to build the view model. And the reason, and we'll say apply here, and the reason I use apply is because I want to chain all of my robot calls together. And so by using apply, I basically say return this instance every time, and that will allow me to chain calls together. And actually, what I'm going to do that is kind of a TDD approach is I'm actually just going to put a bunch of to-do statements into my robot so I can show you how to build a robot and how to compose the tests, and then we'll go through piece by piece and actually implement these things to get the test to pass. Hope that sounds like a good plan. So what does our robot need to do if it's going to be interacting with our view model? Well, it needs to know how to build the view model. It also is going to need to know a little bit about the view model's dependencies. So our view model has a dependency on an article repository, and inside of our unit tests we are going to want to mock that repository. So let's create a method to say mock articles, and then it will take in a list of articles. And again, we'll just write a to-do method here to come back and do that. But we're just going to talk about everything that our robot should be doing. It is going to need... so this network request happens right inside the init method. So actually, if I were to order these just for demonstration's sake, the first thing we're going to want to do is mock the articles. And then we're going to build the view model. And we want to mock first because our network request happens right inside the init block. So we'll mock the articles, we'll create the view model, this fires off the request, and the next thing we want to do is create a function to assert the view state at any given time. So we will say assert view state, take in the expected view state, which is an article list view state. Whoa. And implement that. Now, a problem I've run into in the past that is like my experience shining through that we might not see right away is an issue that comes up when we use mocking libraries or even just our own fake implementations. Is like when I say I'm going to mock the articles, what I'm basically going to say is whenever we call into our fake or mock repository, return these articles instantly. And so those will get returned instantly. Our view model will then show the right view state instantly. And the consequence of this is that I won't actually have a good way to like test my loading state, because if all this happens really fast, I'll be able to test the success state or even the error state, but it will be hard for me to like pause and say like, hey, are we loading right now? Okay, now let's actually emit articles and post that through. So we might change the way this mock articles really works. We'll look at a couple different approaches if we decide to use a fake repository or what. I don't know if I want to pull in a mocking library like Makito. I know it's really popular, or Mock-K, but I've really been into fakes, so you can shout out Brian. He's like made me like very much team fakes. So, alright, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the contract of our test robot. These are the 3 interactions that our tests are going to make on our view model. So let's go back into the test class and actually write a test using that robot, and then we'll implement it. So we'll create a robot, article list view model robot, and then let's create a function, and we'll just call this like successful request. Okay. So what do we want to do? Well, let's create a list of test articles that are going to be returned. And then we'll just say article, and title will be equal. Is that not what I called that field? Oh, right, we used an HTML string last time. Forgot that we changed that inside the, on Saturdays. Why is this yelling at me now? Oh, because article wants everything. So this is something I was running into when we were making the data class. It's like, sometimes I like to be explicit in the app side, but what makes a lack of default parameters annoying is that like sometimes in tests I just want to create a thing. I don't want to have to specify everything if my test just needs to specify one field. That's a trade-off I'm willing to make. So now I can do this. And basically what I'm doing here is like when I have my test articles, later when I go to make an assertion, I want to make sure that like the view is showing the actual test articles. And if I were to just do this, I might get that like it passes, but I don't really have a lot of faith in this test, because how do I know that somewhere further up the pipeline it didn't just use the default arguments? So by giving it an argument that is actually like unique to this test, when I run that assertion later, I know that I'm gonna get like a real pass or failure as a result. So let's create a test robot. We will mock these articles. We will build the view model, and then assert view state, and we have to give it an expected view state. And what is that expected view state? Well, it should actually be So I'm going to write the test that ignores the loading state for right now, because I don't want to overcomplicate this. Let's start by writing some tests. Once we have a test passing, I'll show you how we can work around that suspension function to have it return when we want it to and actually test the loading state. But in this case, because we're going to skip all that, we basically expect this to go straight to article viewState.success with the test articles. So, and this is what I mean by readability, by adding that extra layer of the test robot. It's now this test reads in English to me. It says, okay, mock these articles, build the view model, assert the view state. Like, that's very clear about what's happening. And again, if I change something about like the view model's constructor, if I had dozens of tests, that would be really annoying to work around. But in this case, I can go into the test robots, build view model method, change it there. All of my tests are going to pack. I've given a few talks, written some blog posts on this. If anyone wants more details on the robot pattern, ask me. I'm happy to link to those things. But as we expected, okay, our test failed because nothing inside our robot is implemented yet. So what do we want to implement first? Well, we need to, when we build our view model, we need to give it a repository. And again, we could use a mocking library for this, or we're going to be team fakes, so let's build a fake repository. I'm going to create a new package inside my test folder where I'm going to put fakes. I'm going to create a fake article repository. So we create a class called fake article repository. It will implement article repository, which means we need to override this fetch articles. And again, a foregoing that we may not always want this suspension function to return right away, which is what we're going to come back to. Let's assume we do for right now. So we'll create a private variable for the mocked articles that are going to be returned, which is a list of articles. We'll just start off by saying that's an empty list. And so whenever fetched articles is called, we're going to have this return our mocked articles. And then we need a public method on here, so any caller can set those mocked articles. So we could say set mocked articles, list of articles, mocked articles. So I could make mocked articles public, but I just kind of a little better in this one case. But also, like, I don't need anyone to access the mocked articles, so there's a little bit of good encapsulation here. When you are dealing with fakes, something you might want if you just want to like verify behavior is to like store an integer and say like how many times something was called. So let's look at that, even though I don't know if we will do that in this test. But we could create like a private var and we could call this like fetch articles call count, have that equal to 0. And then so whenever this is called, we can say fetch articles call count plus plus, and then we can create a method to get that and get fetched articles. Fetched articles call count. And the benefit of this is really just to like in our test we could say that we want to ensure that this was only called once. So maybe we complicate this later on, like our error screen has like a retry, and we want to write a test that says, okay, when I retry, I actually want to verify that the total number of times we call this now is 2. That's a reason why you might want to keep track of this call count. I don't know if we'll use it in the test we're writing. We can, since we have it, but that's just another thing that can change with fakes. So let me know if there's any questions around creating a fake implementation. It's a contentious topic about choosing fakes over mocking libraries. To me, fakes are nicer. I found an article I can share in here, but they point out a good thing around these fake implementations is it's actually a little more like black box testing, versus like when you use a mocking library, it requires you to know like even more specifically what some dependency is doing. But it also means like all of the code we're working with is my code, and I like having control over my code. And if I just push off all these responsibilities to Makito, there's a little bit of just like, I don't know what's happening. I'm not really like responsible for this code, so I'm just gonna hope it works out. And that's any third-party library, so I know that's a harsh approach, but you can go either way on it. All right, so now that we have this fake repository, let's go back into our robot. And the management of the fake repository, I'm going to say belongs inside the robot. So we'll create a fake repository, and that'll be a fake article repository. So what we'll do is whenever we call mock articles on our robot, we will just pass that through to our fake repository and set those mocks. When we call build view model, we can then say the view model is equal to article list view model, and then the repository we give it will be our fake repository. And the next thing we need is this assert view state, and that means we have to like create a test observer on the live data. And I think the short way of doing that, I'm going to try to do this on the fly from memory, but we can do something like test observer equals logging observer. That's not what it's called. All right. Oh, I might actually need to add some tests for this. So I'm going to do the classic Android approach, and I'm going to go to another project where I've tested live data in a unit test and copy some code over there. So I'm going to pull up, I've done this in my Cache Caretaker app. Let's see if I can find the file. Test utils. So let me copy this code over, and then I'll show you what it does. So basically what this will do is this is just like a live data observer that will create. It will keep track of the most recent value that was emitted to it. If we want to track every value that's ever been emitted to the live data, we could make this a list and just add to it instead of say equals. And then I've created this extension function that will like create the test observer, bind it to the live data, and it just makes it a little more readable in my tests. So I found this on Stack Overflow ages ago, copied it from there, threw it in my own project. That's how we got here. So let's go into our robot now. And what we will do is we'll say the actual view state is equal to viewModel.state.testObserver.observedValue. And then we will assert that actual view state that is equal to expected view state. And look, I added truth just for you, Brian. Cool. So I actually think we might still see an error here, but let's run this and let's see which error we do get. Oh, Android Studio. Okay. So one failure that's happening here is you'll notice this illegal state exception here that says module with main dispatcher had failed to initialize. So let me walk you through. That's a common error when you write these kind of tests for the first time. Let me show you what happened there. Inside our view model, inside the init method, we launch a coroutine. And when we call launch, by default, it's going to run on the main dispatcher. Or in this case, it is going to run on the main dispatcher because it's called off the main thread. And so our unit test is trying to do that, and then it fails because like there's no main dispatcher inside of a JVM unit test. So it is telling us, let me pull that up above my photo. It's saying for tests, we can use the dispatchers.setMain from the Kotlin X coroutine test module. So where we can put that is inside of our test class. We can put, I'll just show it to you. We could create a before method called setup. And so that at before annotation will say run this before every test. And here we could say dispatchers.setMain, and then we can, oops, and then we can call, what is it called? Dispatchers.unconfined, which is basically saying, inherit from whatever the parent context is. And I think in a unit test, this basically tells it to run using like the global coroutine scope. It won't actually change threads on us. And then, just for consistency's sake, we should have an after. So after the tests, we tear down, and then we can call it dispatchers.resetMain. So this will fix one issue. I actually think we will still have another issue to sort out in our unit tests. But we'll go through them so everyone can see them. That's, again, a reason I was excited to do live streaming and show you some of these errors in real time. So now we get another issue trying to unit test our view model. This one is a runtime exception. And it says method getMainLooper in android.os.looper not mocked. And the reason for that is because we're dealing with a live data, and whenever we like observe and emit to a live data, it seems to do some threading stuff there. I don't actually know the details. But basically, again, because we're running this in a JVM unit test, it can't mock like the main Android thread. So we need to add a JUnit test rule here. And there's one for us. Let me see if I have the thing already. Instant task executor rule. Okay, I don't have it yet. I'll find the dependency. But there is an instant task executor rule, which is, so we need to annotate this with @JVM field, @rule. Actually, I can't make this private. But this is a helper JUnit rule from the architecture components library that will take care of that for us. I don't remember the dependency, so I'm going over to that other project that I mentioned before. I think there's somewhere in here. This is what I want, this architecture core testing library. We want to take this guy and we want to bring that over into our project. So we'll go into our apps.build.gradle file, and we'll add this test implementation, and we'll sync. So if you're unfamiliar with a JUnit rule, what that allows us to do is we can put some code in there that we expect to use across a number of different test classes, and then we can just bring in the rule, and then we can do that stuff. So actually in that cache caretaker project, what I did and what we can bring over here as well is, hey look, our test pass. Nice. We can also take this code, put it into a JUnit rule, and so as we move to additional classes that use coroutines, we can add that JUnit rule and not have to put these setup and tear down methods every time. So why don't we do that, actually? Because that, for me, will mostly be copy and paste stuff. So I'll give you all a chance to ask some questions while I do that, if you want. Go to File. So I'm going to go into my test utils, and I'm going to dump this in here, import everything. So I don't know if you can see it through the red, but this is like this has to implement test watcher. which is a JUnit class. Whoops, and I actually don't want to do that. I don't need that, I don't think. Do I want that? What is this coming from? I'll just trust my copy and paste. But it's basically saying when the test is starting, set main. When it's not, reset main. And so we can use this as we write additional classes that use coroutines or flows or anything like that. We won't have to write those before and after methods ourselves. I guess that's an S. And then, yeah, why not? We'll just add this to the class to get rid of the lit morning. Cool. So let's run this again. Make sure that this actually works. Android Studio. You'll love to see it. We're going to delete this example unit test class. We don't need that anymore. Okay, so we'll push adding tests for article list Xml. Alright, so we've got our coroutine test rule. We've got a thumbs up from the chat. What else do you need? So let's see, we got some questions in here. We wrote some unit tests. Someone wants to say hi to Brian because they're the real MVP. And wondering where Handstand Sam is. I don't think Sam could be here tonight. That's sad. But so Sam is also like the person who I first learned about the robot pattern. He mentioned the robot just like I love it. I love how much time it saves me when I do need to update my tests. I also love how much more readable these unit tests are. And someone once like pointed out they're also just like composable, right? Like I want to do a thing, and so I just start typing, and I know like through autocomplete what my options are. So that's very cool. So I think what we should look into next is, well, so we've got two options here, and we'll let chat weigh in again. We can either talk about how to actually test this loading state with the coroutine, or we can look at using sealed classes instead of data classes for the view state. I'm happy to do both, but if anyone is itching to do one or the other, like, let me know real quick. I think if no one is nominated, let's try, just for experimental sake, taking our article list view state and converting that to a sealed class instead of a data class. So let's take all this code, get rid of it. Class in Kotlin. If you're unfamiliar with these are enums is the way they're usually referred to. So you can define, interact with them like classes, but you can also get the exhaustive support like and like a when case, or yeah, like a when statement. Switch case, I think is what it was called in Java. And within a sealed class, you can either create something called like a class. You can create a class. So we can create a class called loading, which extends article list view state. So loading, for example, has no properties, so you could just convert it to an object. That's what we'll do here. We will create a class called success, and we can give it a list of articles. And have that extend article list view state. And then we want to add that eventually. I think an error should be a class with like the error that actually happened, which would be a throwable. But we'll come back to the error state. So let's just do command function F9 to build the project and see all the places that this compilation fails. Alright, so our display will be updated to use the sealed class now. So how do we want to do this? Well, there's a few things we could do. We could put a when statement here. Let me just show you what that looks like. We could say when view state. And we could say if this is view state.loading, then we can set up loading UI. We can say is list article list view state dot success. We could say set up success UI. This is fine. What we run into though, what we're gonna run into is we'll do something like we'll basically say like this is true here, and then progress bar dot visible if like false over here. The visibility, but I'm not a huge fan of that because we're using almost an identical line in multiple instances. So I'd rather keep to what we had earlier, where we do something like the progress bar is visible if, and then we can say view state is article list view state dot loading, and then article list if view state is article list view state dot success. And then we will need a conditional check here for the success block to see if we should set the articles. So we could say if view state is article list view state dot success, then we can say adapter dot articles equals view state dot articles. So that's something we can do in the initial setup. And with like an error state too, probably. So maybe it even makes sense to do like a when here. We'll clean that up when we get to errors. So let's see where else we can go. So that's a small part of my process to throw out there. So when I drastically change a piece of code like that, I like to just try and compile over and over again and let the error logs take me down the path of fixing them. But this is pretty quick to put like a loading state here. Actually, if I just change that to a capital S, it works. So those factory methods I created were more or less like creating a sealed class. So. I think this is actually going to compile now, so the next thing we'll need to do is run the test. Yep, and then that will fail. So we expect that to be a success. Pretty quick to update that actually. So now that we've seen that, I mean, I guess it is, I don't know if there's anything we changed that I feel very strongly about in terms of preferring sealed class. Failed. Ooh, I'll show you why in a second. If there's any reason I feel super strongly about using sealed classes, with the exception of like when you have a data class that has like a boolean for showing a loading state and showing a success state, there's nothing stopping my data class from having both of those be true, and that's not ideal. That should never happen. But with sealed classes, I have that more type safety of like in this state or this state or this state. So I like it. I'm happy to push this up and ship this. Hopefully the person who asked that question is still hanging around and was able to see it. If not, they can catch it in the video or in the code change. Let me know if you have any questions about those sealed classes, or if anyone thinks we shouldn't use them for any reason. But let's talk about why this test failed now. So what a data class does give us is the nice thing of data class. We get the nice two-string automatically it overrides equals and hash code for us that regular classes do not. And when I created this sealed class, and I created a class, do you call it a subclass? I don't know. When I created the success class, it was not a data class. And so you can see from the output here that it's trying to compare two different success instances, but they have different references in memory. So because they aren't the same memory reference, this equality check, we can fix that by going to the success class and making it a data class. That's it. That's all that has to be done. Run our again, and it should work this time. Perfect. Second try. I'll take it. Converting article list view state. Thanks for that suggestion. I think that code is a little nicer. So awesome. And then since we've done some of that refactoring, but let's run the app again just to make sure that we haven't accidentally broke something. In a future stream, we can do some would be about. Let's see. There's the loading bar and the articles. Nice. Everything is still working. So let's take our tests a step further and let's say we want to test a loading state too. So how can we do that? Let's continue with the test-driven development approach. Let's look at this test robot method and think about how we would change this if we want to test our loading state in a successful manner. Well, really, let's think about what happens sort of conceptually with like a coroutine, right? So a coroutine is some asynchronous operation that runs and it returns once it happens. So conceptually what we want to do is we want to build the view model, which we know will start this coroutine. We want to assert the loading state, or assert that the loading state is being emitted. Then we want to simulate the articles being returned from the coroutine, and then we want to assert the successful loading state. So actually, even though I needed mock articles first, I would change this to say test-robot.build view model, assert the view state, say the expected view state is .loading, and then we would mock the articles. Whoa, this is what we want our test to look like. Now we can run this and it won't work, understandably, but we're gonna make it work. But we'll run this, make sure it fails. I'll try to take an even more strict TDD approach on here than I do in most projects. I'm a huge fan of TDD, test-driven development. I think, the idea is great. What we're actually, striving for. But I also know it's, hard to do in practice. I'm sure all of us at our job put off unit tests more than we want to say we do. But I'll try to do that less here. Okay, so this test ran, didn't crash, but we can see it failed. It returned an empty list of articles. I didn't get to test my loading state. So where do we go to handle that? Well, we actually want to go into our fake article repository. And what do we want to change there? Well, we have this call to fetch articles. And what this suspension function does is it returns instantly. So how do I mock, in a suspension function, a coroutine that is, not going to return instantly? And the thing we use for that is something called a continuation. And we can return that continuation. We can use the continuation to, simulate suspending and waiting, and then we can return that continuation inside this suspension function. So let's type it out. Maybe that'll make more sense. So we'll create something called an article list continuation. That will equal a that extends continuation of list of articles. I think we can just say that. What am I missing? Do I need this? How did I do this in the past? It's been a while since I've done this. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to cheat and look at some old code. So let's look at an old project where I've done this. I've done this in my Pokédex project. That is one of my other... where did I do it? Was it in here? Nope. Sorry. Please hold. You get to see some stuff live while I try to figure out. So I have fake repository here. So this project uses flows. Shout out to Mohit if you're watching. And I think we will probably want to change the study guide project to use flow. We're not going to do that today, but ideally we will want to. But we run into a similar situation with flow, where when the we want to like return something, but we don't actually want like the data to be emitted yet. So I'm going to go up here to my history for this file, and I'm going to look at this old commit before the flow, and I'm going to how I create. Okay. So the continuation is supposed to be late in it. We will set that later. So we're going to change this continuation to be late in it, to say we're going to have some continuation for a list of articles, but we don't have a value for it yet. Hi Tristan, thank you for coming by. And then what we're going to do from fetch articles is, instead of returning the mocked articles, we're going to return a suspend coroutine. And that's going to give us the continuation for this like suspend coroutine I'm creating. And then I'm going to say that our article list continuation is equal to that. And I know this is confusing, this is difficult to wrap your mind around, and I think that it will help me to finish the thought, finish the code, and then I can properly explain to you what you're looking at. When fetch articles is called, it's going to create this suspend coroutine and return that. So what will happen in my unit test is the viewModel will call this fake repository, it will call fetch articles, and then it will suspend. It will suspend itself with this reference to this continuation, and then when I am ready for this to continue, I will need to tell this continuation to move forward. And the way I do that is articles, I can then say article list continuation dot resume with, or just resume, and then articles. So it won't be until I call set mocked articles that continuation actually resumes. And then from here, our viewModel will now receive the articles and be in the success state. I hope that's clear. I'm happy to repeat that. I'm happy to add some logging so we can see that in action. But maybe it makes sense now to actually shift function F6 to refactor and rename this to emit articles or something, because that's what I'm really doing. And that's also good terminology when I change this into like a flow later on. And we should use this article calc count reference later on just to check it out. So now that we have that, all that we need to change from this TDD approach to get this to work. So we'll build our viewModel that will call our fake repository. It will suspend using the suspend coroutine that we just created. we can assert that we're in the loading state. We can say mock articles, or rather we can even rename this one to, emit articles as well. And then we will want to assert our new view state. Let's run this and see if it worked. And I know that was complex, so please let me know if I need to repeat any of that. I'm happy to. What time is it? Anyone else here excited that hockey is back this week? Or is that just me? That's probably just me. I mean, I'm overall mad at the NHL, but you know, sports ball. This test passed. This suspend thing works. And let's add, just for consistency's sake, since we made it, we're going to go into our robot and we're going to add another assert and say like assert number of calls to fetch articles. And then we'll take in an int for the expected calls. I could probably just make this assume 1, but we'll let the test specify if we want more than 1. So actual calls is going to be fake repository dot get fetched articles call count. We'll say assert that actual calls that is equal to expected calls. And so inside our view model test, assert number of calls to fetch articles should be 1. Let's run this test one more time, make sure it still passes. So that was fun to make. Awesome. So, alright, we have done a loading state. We can continue to do what we said. We'll just run this on the emulator to make sure we didn't actually accidentally break it. Now, we've thoroughly tested this loading state and success state. So the next thing would be to build an error state. I think we should do that next. I had a ticket in here to consider doing a fancier loading animation. Maybe look at Lottie and replace the circle progress bar with a more exciting animation. But no one seemed like super thrilled about that in the beginning, so maybe an error state is something we should build next. Let me know in chat if you are feeling one of the others. Updating test to verify loading state. And I've actually got like a lot of code here just for the loading state, so I'm going to go ahead just briefly go into GitHub and merge this pull request while I wait to see if anyone has any questions. I also just noticed the time. We've already been streaming for an hour. That's pretty standard. I am happy to keep going. Tristan just got here, so I'm happy to keep hanging out, but I understand if people are tired. Anyone got any random thoughts? What do you think of, are you all enjoying the stream so far? Do you stream at the same? Yeah, on Wednesdays I do. I usually start around 6:30 Eastern time. Let me know if that does or does not work for you. It's quarantine, so I'm pretty flexible on days of the week. I did one on Saturday that I might do every once in a while just to reach some of my friends who are like not on the East Coast. Thanks, Brian. What do I think of GitHub labels? I should probably use them more than I do. I think labels are, self-plug. You can also always follow the account, and you should get be able to get notifications whenever I go live. So definitely check that out if you want to. So that's a good question, Brian. How do I feel about labels? I mean, labels are good. They serve a purpose. I think that thank you guys. I'm so excited. I think that when I do projects here that like I'm kind of managing by myself, I'm quick to like overlook. But I think they can be really helpful when you're like doing some open source work and you want to give additional visibility into what's happening. Like they have really great labels here for like, this is a good first issue, help wanted. Things like a question. This helps the maintainer see like what an issue is as they're like scrolling down the list here, you know. So, oh, did that not stick? Put it on the pull request. So I think labels are good. I don't have any bad things to say about them. I'm just not really in the habit of using them here. Thank you for the nice comments. I'm really glad this is working. It makes me excited to keep doing it. How do you all feel about like the time length? Like so far we've kept it around an hour. I feel like that's worked well. Do you think that that's a good amount of time? Do you think they're too long? Do you want me to keep going? Any thoughts on that? Yeah, referencing an issue in a commit is great, and you get a lot of integration from that. So, like, just by looking at the commit here, I can see a hyperlink is created for that issue. Also, when I view the issue, I can see any commits that were made that reference it. So it just gives like so much more visibility and insight into what's happening around an issue. So you go out sick or you leave a team or like these things are just great for creating visibility into things. And then you can go see like the actual like code that was part of it. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, there's so much more you can do with. I think I'm kind of done with the coding, but I'm happy to keep chatting and answer some questions while this pull request runs. There's a lot more integration stuff that we have talked about or explored that would be good for this project or projects in general. I know I showed you all KT-lint and detect and creating GitHub Actions to do continuous integration for you. But there's so much more you can do. You can have GitHub Actions do things like automatically publishing to the Play Store. We could write some UI tests and have those run. I really love this tool called Danger, which is like, it's actually built in Ruby. It's built in a few different languages. There's different versions. But what Danger does is it can like run some tasks for you and then additional information on the pull request. So let me show you what that looks like. So this was my Pokédex project. That is another thing that I like to tinker with. That's a bad example. The danger checks failed. So like here is a bot commenting on a pull request using Danger, and to thank whoever the author of the pull request is. So it's usually me, but if someone else were to make a pull request into the project, it will alert them. And then I also use this Gradle plugin that is going to check for anything that is an outdated Gradle version, and then it will comment right on my pull request and say, hey, these things are out of date. Like, you can consider updating, you don't have to. But that's just additional information in case I'm not actively checking in the IDE for new versions. Danger can do that for me. I've also seen examples where it can like report on app size. So if you want to see like if a new pull request is making your app, your APK significantly smaller or larger, that's helpful. There's even a check style plugin that like, let's say I commit some code and I have a specific line that does not meet my formatting standards. Danger can go to that line in the pull request, you know, like looking at the diff, and it can leave a comment at that line. This line is not formatted for this reason, like this is the error, and help me spot that so much faster. So that's pretty cool. Maybe we can, when we have some more time, we'll try that one out just for fun. I think, yeah, it's 8 o'clock. I'm going to skip the air states tonight. I'm sorry, Brian. I appreciate the idea, though. It'll be the first thing we work on. We will go to next Wednesday. I can't do this Saturday, so we will do this stream again next Wednesday. But over to this project. We got some new stars today, which means new people did come hang out. I appreciate that. To the person who mentioned referencing a commit from, or referencing an issue from a commit, you can also use keywords like fixes number 14. And if you use that keyword at the start of your commit, whenever that commit ends up in your base branch, GitHub will automatically close the issue for you. That's helpful, so you don't have to manually go clean them up. Oh wow, you're in Melbourne. Yeah, sorry about Saturday. I mean, the Earth is a huge place, so I there will always be stuff like that. Woke up yesterday thinking of stream, only to, yeah. But you know, I'll play around with it. I mean, I'm happy to do more. That's why I'm glad Twitch saves the videos. The Earth is too big, but is it flat? That is the question. So, and then I think I said this on Saturday. So, my plan right now is to keep every Wednesday working on this study guide. Slowly get to something where we can actually go through and publish this to the Play Store. And then hopefully we just keep adding features onto it because this is fun. And each stream we can look into some niche topic. Tristan here. But I'm always open to ideas on different things to do with the stream. So if we build like enough of an audience, I'd love to maybe bring people on to like do some paired programming, talk about certain things, or and just do like an AMA, or you know, I think that would be fun to try to gear to like college students who are learning Android or want to get into Android and reach some people that way. I think most of the audience are people who are already boards. But if you know someone who would be interested in doing like a live learning session, I'd be happy to do that. Or even within the study guide, if you have suggestions or ideas on stream topics. So these issues were things that were at the forefront of my mind. But go to this link. I'll post it in there so you all know how to find it. But if you think of something and you want to see it added to this and you want to talk about it, we can do that. You know, so there's things in here. I don't know what's not in here. Animations. Brian has brought up material design. I should make an issue for adding flow. There's a lot. A walkthrough on Pokédex. Yeah, we could. Pokédex is definitely like a little more complicated. It's like this multi-module project, and it uses Kotlin, Gradle DSL. What started as like me wanting to build like a sandbox and showcase some best practices turned into really just like my own out with the README pointing out to like specific things. But this project got not even that like attractive of a project. It's literally just like a recycler view with Pokemon names. But there's the key store jokes. But yeah, maybe I could do a session on that. I'd be happy to. Over here, see if anyone no Slido questions. Yeah, we're gonna have to worry about another key store eventually. That should be fun. We'll make it work. We'll make it work. I won't delete it again on accident. there are certain mistakes in life you only make lunch once. Only make lunch. Wow, I'm apparently hungry. That's one of those mistakes. So, Google Drive, yeah. I mean, there's also iCloud, which I'm grateful for, because last time I bought a laptop, I like completely forgot about it again. But I opened up my new laptop and that was like already in my documents folder. And I was like, oh, thank God. I think I do have it saved on Google Drive now. But yeah, I think other stream ideas, just kind of talking out loud. I haven't caught up on Android 11. Google has put out like a ton of material. They did their 11 weeks of Android, where they publish something every week on like what was new in Android 11, and I'm so far behind. But it would be cool to like look into some new stuff. Maybe even look at the Canary Android Studio, because that has some tooling in it that I'm very excited about. Android Studio 4.1 or 2. I'm not sure. I think it might be 4.1 that's coming out. That's in beta now. But one of the upcoming Android Studios is coming with a built-in database inspector. So you can run your app and then open up the database inspector inside your room database. I'm very excited for that, because debugging room databases has historically been very difficult and very painful. So I'm excited to see support for that. So that could be a fun stream to look into. So I appreciate the chat questions. I'm just gonna hang out for a little bit and chat, until it dies off, and then we'll stop. So. Tristan, are you gonna stream some Valorant tonight? Thank you for the follow. Tell them all I said hello. But if y'all hang out on Twitch a lot, you should follow Sir Hype. He streams Valorant. It's fun. Usually like really late at night my time, so I go hang out with him when I can't sleep. My favorite thing about this project is that's always a win. I wish I could like pull up the things right now, but we've been pushing more and more for like we use Kotlin for all the new code at OkCupid. We stopped writing Java code. We've also recently deleted a bunch of legacy code, and now that code base is like 70+% Kotlin, which is really exciting. I think I was just talking about you playing Valorant. There was nothing to miss. And then bragging about how this is 100% Kotlin. Any questions? Awesome. Well, again, thank you all for hanging out. I feel awkward. I'm watching this view count go up as I'm about to sign off. I wonder if more people are coming in because this is a might play around with the times. Who writes Java anymore? So Tristan, I actually have this great idea. So you know how once you are a Twitch affiliate, you can have people can redeem them. One of my things will be like, write the next file in Java, or like maybe for like 5,000 channel points, I can get someone to convince me to write a file in Vim. Those are some ideas of using channel points that I have. Yeah. Because I'm a masochist. All of them. Like, you just need every Twitch user to agree, and if you can do that, I'll do it. But Wait, you can't take me up on that because you'll be staff and I'm sure you will cheat. So someone else is going to have to take the lead on that. I can just see like the code review now. What's this key store bet script? Awesome. All right, it's 8 o'clock. I'm done. I'm gonna go watch some hockey. Thank you again all for coming. I appreciate the feedback. I'll see you all next Wednesday.